I'm Saundra Kelley, and I'm here with an invitation to you to listen to the stories of Jacqueline Brunet, the drop side of Yonder. It's all about life in small town America in the 1930s and 40s. And it starts from chapter 1 with spirits, sports, and a country bumpkin. Just imagine with us this journey back to small town America. When I was growing up in Gregory, Michigan, we lived across the road from the school. The only ones who carried their lunches were the farm kids, and I envied them. They had fragrant sandwiches made of peanut butter, bologna, egg salad, and tuna fish. Some of them had neat little lunch pails with a handle in which several pounds of peanut butter were packed for sale. When it was gone, they had a nice lunch pail to use, and I envied them with their homemade lunches and cute containers. I wished I had one. Instead, I had to go home and eat potatoes and gravy, meat and vegetables, and maybe a cookie or a piece of pie. My mother was a stay-at-home mom, as most moms were then, but she was also a gadabout. When she was out, I was expected to finish Dad's lunch preparations. She cooked the dinner, and I was expected to warm it up if a long period had gone by, and then I set his plate, silverware, and glass out on the table, and dished it up for him and poured his glass of milk. One such day, when I was about 8 or 9, I was home and getting things ready for Dad's lunch, and I happened to think of some bottles of something I'd seen over the cellar steps. I knew they were special because my mother got them out only at Christmas time. I decided to be creative and gave Dad something instead of milk. I poured water glasses full of the unknown substance for him and for me. We sat down together to eat, but when I took a swig, I gasped. My dad said nothing but took a sip, smacked his lips as if it were perfectly delicious. A few minutes later, he said he believed he would not finish it and poured it down the sink and asked for milk instead. After he left the table, I poured the remainder of my glass out, too. Oh, I realized my choice of beverage had not been a big success, even though my dad had not said so. It became one of his tales after I grew up how my eyes had become huge and my face full of shock as I gulped my first swallow of straight whiskey. Several years later, I experienced a short sports career. To resurrect my life as a sportswoman, I must rummage through my brain some 60 years back. I confess that I am blessed with a generous assistant in this endeavor, the Gregory Review. It's a newspaper created by J. Paul Bushell, teacher of 8th, 9th, and 10th grades in Gregory. He was finishing up his master's degree in journalism at the time, and the articles in his paper were written by the students. In addition to his teaching of all subjects in all 3 grades, Mr. Bushell organized softball, football, and table tennis teams for the students. Results of the games were covered in the school newspaper by the student reporters. A December 1941 newspaper article reported that I, Jackie Brunizer, had 17 straight victories in the all-girl table tennis tourney, making me the champion. On February the 25th, a sports story stated that Sam Hartley, also a 9th grader, had won the boys' league. I don't find a copy of the newspaper, which would have confirmed my victory over Sam that year. However, a March 31st, 1943 issue has this headline: Jackie Brunizer retains the table tennis crown. This time the loser was Dick Young. I can't find a newspaper dated in 1942, but I also recall never giving up my championship. 4 league touch football games consisted of the Galloping Grasshoppers, Grumpy Gorillas, Gorgeous Gargoyles, and Goofy Gophers. According to the October 1st, 1941 issue of the Review, I discovered as I read this paper that I had scored 13 points in 2 winning games for the Gorillas against the Gophers and the Gargoyles. The October 29th issue of the Review states that the Gorillas had become league champions and had then played against the All-Stars. Unfortunately, in that final game, I was tackled before crossing the goal line after catching a pass, and sadly the All-Stars won. In March 31st, 1943 issue of the Review, a headline screams that I had retained my table tennis crown, and that Dick Young finished second in the stirring last-ditch fight. I see only a small amount in the review pertaining to softball, perhaps because most of the incomplete papers I have were published during the winter. The headline of one did jump out at me. Hamburg devoured by the Gregory Nine. Now that, in my opinion, is a first-class headline. There is nothing said about my contributions, if any, to the 18-2 score. It does note that I, the only girl on the team, played right field. Alas, that was the end of my sports career. I've stumbled through the rest of my life without fame, and the occasional glory of the Detroit Tigers has had to feed my soul. The citizens of Gregory were in an uproar. For reasons I don't recall, the 10-grade school and the 3-room schoolhouse might become an 8th-grade school. It hadn't happened yet, but residents were locking horns with one another. My mother was on the school board, and it was her preference that the 9th and 10th grades remain in Gregory. Before a final vote could be taken, all the upcoming 10th graders, presumably at their parents' direction, jumped ship. All except me. Within a few years, the schools did consolidate. 9th and 10th graders were bused to the nearby towns of Stockbridge or Pinckney. But during the year of the controversy, I went through 10th grade alone. When I was in 5th through 7th grades, my teacher was Evelyn Bushell, an intelligent woman with a kindly disposition. She had an ability to teach and encourage bright pupils, allot time to the slower learners, and keep order in the classroom. Her husband, J. Paul Bushell, teacher of classes 8, 9, and 10, was great with the smart kids, but impatient and sarcastic with slow learners and lazier students. Mr. Bushell, who spent a few summers earning a master's degree in journalism, passed his knowledge on to his students by initiating the school newspaper. I had written for the newspaper when it began a year earlier. I was appointed editor in the 10th grade. 10th grade was an interesting full year for me. Not only did I take the usual classes, but also journalism and 2 extras. Mrs. Bushell volunteered to teach me typing after school, and Leanna Howlett, a former teacher, taught me first-year Latin. I also wrote the Gregory News for the weekly Stockbridge Brief Sun at 10 cents an item. It was a busy year. I wanted to go to the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor after graduation, and also decided I'd like to take 11th and 12th grades in Ann Arbor as preparation. When I went in September to register at Ann Arbor High School, I met the principal. After he looked at my records, he looked over the top of his spectacles, and he said, "I see that you have received excellent grades. However, you must realize that Ann Arbor High School is much larger than Gregory. I would not expect you to do that well here." He continued on in that vein until I felt my face redden and my body shrink. He thought I was ignorant. I was so embarrassed, and my feelings were hurt. Maybe I was nothing but a country bumpkin and didn't belong there. My courage began to crumble, but pride convinced me to ignore his remarks and continue my plan. As a pre-college student, I selected geometry, English, history, journalism, and second-year Latin. When I arrived at Ann Arbor High, it seemed huge. All the subjects I were taking were in different rooms. The building had 2 stories, and finding my way was a challenge during the first week. It took me a few days just to find the girls' restroom. While the teachers seemed quite nice, though, a couple of them scared me in the beginning. After 6 weeks, when report cards were handed out, I was busy in the study hall one day when I was called to the desk by the assistant principal. I walked nervously to his desk, and he said, "You're a new student in this school, aren't you?" I said I was. "I want to congratulate you on your grades. I know it must have been somewhat difficult for you in the beginning, being in a new school, but not many do this well. I want you to know that we are proud to have you here." I whispered a relieved, "Thank you," and floated back to my desk. My 2 years at Ann Arbor High were wonderful. Shortly after I arrived, I worked on the school newspaper, and the following year I was appointed front page editor. And just before I graduated, I was awarded a scholarship to the University of Michigan. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Not true. Words do hurt. They can also make one float on air. I would like to have shown my report card to the principal, given him a good kick, and said, "Look at this, you fat old toad." I don't ever want to hear anyone going around sneering at my hometown Gregory. Now that's the end of chapter 1. There are 13 more chapters in this book, and I hope you enjoy what you just heard and that you continue to listen to every single one. Don't miss anything Jacqueline Brunet has to say.